Ideas for Impact, a new podcast where innovation meets sustainability head on. Let's take a fresh look at how we do business. Changemakers are innovating solutions to some of the toughest challenges we face in our world. In the process, they are creating their own mark on industry. Our guests are rebels with a cause. They are tearing down barriers, redefining success, and leaving a mark on their industries. Our guests are the disruptors who refuse to settle for business as usual. Join us to unravel the lessons learned behind their failures and their triumphs, and uncover the hidden opportunities for positive change. Co-hosted by me, Joanna Buczkowska-McCumber, and my friend, Deborah Host. We spend close to 85% of our time in the built environment. Our homes, work, restaurants, malls, passport offices, you name it. The spaces we live and work in truly shape our lives. If they're not well designed for our well-being, we feel it. Meet Gensler, an architecture and design firm on a mission to creating a better world through the power of design, challenging conventional ideas about architecture and the built environment. They are truly reimagining cities and places that make a difference in people's lives. And today we're joined by Elaine Asal, the Principal and Strategic Director of Gensler, to share her experience and ideas about how design plays such a critical role in impact.
Let's get right into it. Tell us a little bit about who you are, the work you're doing with Gensler, what's Gensler up to. Let's start there.
Yeah, that's a big question. So for those that aren't familiar with Gensler, Gensler is a large global design firm. We have over 50 offices spanning the globe. I practice in the Baltimore office. I've been in the Baltimore office for about 20 years, but I am very grateful that I get to work. I get to work across the globe, but I focus a lot on our Southeast region. So I get to work a lot between our Philadelphia, DC, Baltimore, Raleigh, Charlotte, Tampa, Miami offices. And then certainly where opportunities take me across the country is very cool. But Gensler is really an amazing place because there's such a wide range of scale of project work that they do. So we have a lot of different practice areas. We have a lot of different types of work we engage in. There's a big group that does just strategy. So the world that I belong to is largely strategy, but it's strategy in service of kind of the built environment and design and all of the other architectural work that we do. So it's a very integrated perspective. We also have, there's folks focusing on, digital presence with our DXD group. We have a lot of urban planning. So there's all this scale shifting that I think makes this a really dynamic organization to be a part of. In terms of what we do in Baltimore, I'm part of our strategy team. So it's a regional team of about 20-something of us. And we support a pretty wide range of work. So everything from like real estate studies to change management to stakeholder engagement to workplace strategy. On some other sides, we do a lot of public engagement, ESG strategy, so sustainable strategy. So there's sort of this wide range of things that we're able to support as a strategy team. In many cases, it's in service to our architecture partners and design partners. And in other cases, it's kind of more standalone, just strategy work. So organizational development, strategic planning organizations. So it's a pretty neat sort of lens to be able to engage in so many different types of spaces and types of projects.
And what about Gensler itself? Like, so in trying to prep for our call today, went on the website and was like, wait, what is this tagline? Because our podcast is really about businesses that are creating a positive impact socially and environmentally. And so Gensler's tagline is, let me just read it out for you: creating a better world through the power of design. And I thought that was very interesting because I was like, how do you achieve a better world through design? Can you speak to that at all? Can you tell me?
Sure. Part of it is, I think, the built environment or like the world that we walk in every day and inhabit can do so much to whether it's inspire us or connect us to each other. It can encourage healthy behaviors and habits. It can support practical needs. It can support spiritual needs. There's so much that we get from the environment that we're a part of. if we think about the design of that environment, it has the ability to impact so much of that day-to-day lived experience. And I think there's a lot of power and responsibility in that. What's interesting from a Gensler perspective and why this like creating a better world through the power of design is so meaningful is that we touch a lot of square footage. We touch a lot of the spaces that people walk through every day, whether that's airports or cities or, parks or workplaces. Like, it's a lot of square footage. And that impact, if you think about it in aggregate, it's just, there's so much from a scale standpoint that it's shaping how we're seeing the world and engaging with the world. So I find it really meaningful to be in a place like this. And I think the other thing that's really exciting about that is, and just thinking about organizations that you guys are focused on talking to, when I think about that, the scale that we touch, small shifts that we make can have a greater impact because of that square footage. So, for example, Gensler just recently released GPS, global product standards. So trying to raise a level on what we think is a baseline for sustainability. Because of the purchasing power connected to Gensler and the clients that we're touching and the square footage that that's connected to, that's creating an industry shift. People are having to sort of think about, okay, well, if Gensler is requiring this from a specification standpoint, we need to make sure that our baseline products meet the GPS standards. So I think that's the kind of stuff that gets really exciting, is you sort of like raise the bar within the organization, and that in turn can raise the bar across the industry. And so there's just a lot of these ripple effects that can be really powerful.
Have you had any pushback? Something that comes up a lot in these conversations is when you talk about sustainability and raising the bar, it often comes with a price point that's higher than what it was, especially in the short term, because I think the prevention component is massive, but that is a long-term experience. Have you or Gensler at large have had pushback from any of your clients that made you compromise or forced you to compromise or shift at all?
I think what we try and do is, again, push the industry in a way that makes it easier for everybody to meet this kind of new baseline. So I don't think there's certainly going to be clients that are making decisions based on different things. I think what we're trying to do is set up a better set of options. We're trying to set up so that it's not always this like zero sum, okay, well, I'm just going to go with a cheaper option period. So I think there's always going to be that short-term pushback. But I think the commitment that Gensler's made from a 2030 climate action perspective is we have to be taking these steps to get to a place to where this isn't as difficult of a decision to make. So I do think there's always going to be that interim and incremental sort of challenge, but I think their vision from a long-term standpoint is, how are we moving everyone further along and creating more options for ourselves that aren't always putting us in this binary of it must be either sustainable or really cheap. It's working towards that. I think there's certainly going to be that kind of near term that's a bit bumpier, but the intent is moving everyone forward.
What about you? So your role in strategy, how does that connect to impact and design? How do you work to connect all of these categories?
It's been a journey. I think it's useful to share that I started in a more traditional architecture role, and then over the years transitioned to more fully where I am today, which is in strategy. And I think for me, that early experience was super helpful to ground my understanding in what is the design process? How do architects think? How do designers think? What are the challenges that they experience? What are the phases of work? Just how does it all work? And that understanding that, and then simultaneously, I was investing in learning and engaging in the world of social impact design, kind of trying to understand design thinking, building up skills around engagement and facilitation methods. I think also in the context of being in Baltimore City, which is an education in and of itself of just systemic issues and how people are kind of working to understand them and explore them. For me, all of those things together, like as I moved away from traditional design into strategy, I think having that foundation was really meaningful, and building those skills at the same time helped to weave it in. So it was a gradient over time. if I think about it today, you kind of shared impact, strategy, and design. To me, impact is sort of defining the why of what we're doing and trying to get to some clarity around what is that why. And then, strategy and design are, of course, interconnected. But if I think about strategy as sort of a how, and then design is a little bit of the what, they all kind of need each other to work together. And I think because of my experience and how I come into our project work, I lead with strategy. So my role is often, when I'm working with others in a team, how do I bring a clear methodology? Are we asking the right questions? Do we have all the right partners? Are we connecting our approach and our activities back to our intent and our purpose? How are we thinking about outcomes on the backside? Are we measuring? Are we coming back and exploring? So I think I try and be like a backbone for process and try and connect dots as much as possible and help to bring order to. In design, it is inherently the creative process can be chaotic. So how are you bringing some order to that? And then conversely, where things are a bit too structured or orderly, how are we bringing creative chaos to disrupt it and make it interesting? So finding that balance between those two tends to be the space that I try and occupy day to day. And I think if we think about that, like what it looks like in terms of activities, it's a lot of creating, visualizing structures and frameworks and process. It's a lot of writing and putting words to ideas. I'm also really obsessed with specificity and trying to get teams to make sure that the words that we're using really represent the unique challenge we're trying to solve. And then again, connecting those things back to like outcomes and results so that we can learn and improve. So I think all of that is just this like consistent backbone of these processes to make sure that we're living up to the potential of what we're trying to do.
Is there a case study or an example that you can highlight that you're working on right now that would really exemplify what it is that you're describing?
There's a few of these. I think the one that comes to mind in here, so for a design project, I'm thinking of, we have a library that we're working on. So I have a couple of different library projects. We're working on a branch library right now. So we have a design team. Design team is, of course, thinking about the physical structure. They're thinking about some of the mechanic, the MEP systems. They're thinking about the design experience. And what we're helping them do is also bring in this layer of qualitative understanding and research. What is the staff experience? How are we engaging with staff to kind of understand what their challenges and needs are? How are we thinking about, in this particular library, they're interested in exploring ideas around entrepreneurship. It's for a largely majority minority community. So how are they thinking about inclusivity and welcoming? How are we thinking about sustainability? And kind of the system has some goals around sustainability. So how are we leveling up our approach to sustainability? So the design team certainly has ideas around that. I think what we are doing is trying to create more structure to how we can organize those ideas. So if we really want to understand kind of inclusivity and welcoming, what are other places that do that really well? And how do we bring those ideas back to the library? Are there places that we all can visit together? How do we take the library staff on that journey so they can sort of get out of their own mindsets of what they think a library should be and start to have kind of a more open conversation about the role of the space, their roles, what that experience can look like, how they can support minority communities to become citizens. Like there's all these ways that you can start to unlock some traditional thinking to open up new possibilities. So I think it's creating the journey both for the staff, for the leadership, for the design team to unlock, here's other ways that we could think about solving this problem that maybe that can be more interesting and can actually yield a better result that's more aligned to the challenge that we're trying to solve.
When it comes to libraries, I'm very interested in that subject matter just because I go to the library and then I go online to download whatever books I can't find in the physical environment. I'm curious, based on the work you've done in libraries so far, what's come up that's unique or interesting about where the future of the library is going? It is a great example of an institution that has a positive social impact. It could also have a positive environmental impact, depending on the architecture and landscape. But I'm curious if anything's come up.
It's a huge conversation right now. And I think a lot of that, there's a lot of scrutiny on libraries, especially post-pandemic, with certainly there you're seeing with it's been over years now, like this move towards digital, this move towards everything's on our phone. You don't need the physical book as much. There's a culture with kind of new generations that's more, again, digitally driven versus the kind of wandering through the books and pulling out, there's just less of that in-person experience. But what we are seeing is that libraries, there's a few things that I think that jump out. One, I love kind of restating this because I think it's such an important fact. Libraries are still seen as a trusted government institution. They're one of the few government institutions that you just see a higher level of trust across the board. So I think what that means in a time where so many of our communities are fragmented, so much of our time and energy is kind of absorbed in all these different ways, the library continues to be this like cornerstone of community that is a positive and meaningful place for people to connect and gather. So I think it's this idea. I think one of the shifts that we're seeing is this move from static collection to a place to connect to resources. And those resources can be people, they can be things, they can be experiences. And there's a lot of ways that shows up. So I mentioned entrepreneurship. I mentioned citizenship. There's a lot of people that might use libraries to apply for citizenship, apply for benefits, apply for, just some basic needs. They may be bringing their families with them to the library. So the family is sort of there because they don't have childcare. So they need, their kids to sort of have things to do. They may be learning English. There's all these ways that we're seeing libraries as this entry point for new immigrants to the US. So there's all these just interesting ways that I think it shows up. And I think we're seeing libraries take on a more active role, whether it's from a programming standpoint, hosting, being a place where nonprofits or other organizations or city agencies know where to get to people, and they're able to create a space of intersection there. So, I think there's all these interesting places that it's evolving towards, and I think we're just going to see libraries continue to become a more active space. They already do a lot of programming and activity, but I think it's just shifting the perception to where you're actually seeing that be a more physical characteristic of the library as a place to host and gather and play and convene. There's so much potential in that. That's really exciting.
I remember a library that I would go to when I was younger to study or to get projects done. This is when I was in high school. And I remember thinking that library was unique because it was such a beautiful space. But at the time, I didn't really have the awareness to understand what made it beautiful. I just thought, wow, it's big. There's lots of natural light. Looking back, it was a green building. So makes sense. And pivoting a little bit to sustainable design and how it used to be this option. And today I don't think it's an option anymore. So where is Gensler at when it comes to working on projects? And where is the bar set currently in terms of like how environmentally sound or conscious this building and architecture needs to be?
I think what's interesting is that there's a lot more sophistication in basically our understanding of sustainable systems, how they all come together. There's a lot more expectations around, I think you mentioned like natural light. I think people sort of are more recognizing the longer term benefits and the economic benefits of how efficient systems can sort of help to both support or minimize longer term costs or help kind of offset costs. And again, I think there's generally more solutions in the industry that are responding to those things. So I think, again, that baseline is, I think, going up. I think if I think about one of the ways you sort of mentioned, like the presence, architectural presence, and what I'm really appreciating is, especially in the realm of like landscape architecture or urban planning, how people are finding really brilliant ways to create interesting design opportunities out of practical challenges. So things like stormwater infrastructure, other kinds of like shore mitigation things. We're seeing a lot of like turning those into community amenities, green space, educational experiences. There's a lot more, I think, intentionality of connecting the more infrastructure, the sustainable infrastructure investments to things that community is experiencing that's providing value in a different way. So I think that's been really kind of interesting to continue to see opportunities around. And especially if I think about like waterfronts, there's a lot more of like softening edges of waterfronts, and just kind of recognizing that the natural world is there, then trying to keep it pushed out. How do we sort of invite it and adapt to it and kind of accept it and use that as another mitigation strategy versus these like hard walls? You're seeing a lot more, I think, blurring. I think that's true in buildings too. Like we want fresh air, we want access to the outside, we want a lot more of this like blurred engagement with the outside as part of the human desire and experience that we're looking for. So it is both sustainable and about sustainability and resilience, but it's also about a better human experience that allows us to adapt and kind of have a different relationship with our buildings and urban environment.
What have you noticed the most in terms of the urban landscape and change that can give us all hope for what's to come?
I think our cities, our city leaders, our cities, city agencies, our communities, institutions, everyone's just a lot more aware of what's possible. And I think more open to engaging in ways. I mean, there have been sort of bouts of this over the years, but I feel like there's an increase of what people expect. And I think that accountability is kind of holding everyone to a higher standard in terms of what they're delivering, which is, I think, a really good thing. And I think because of that higher expectation, what it's driving is recognizing that work is hard. It's hard to deliver an incredible experience at the cost that's needed, that everybody's happy with in an inclusive way. Like there's all these demands on this work now. I mean, there always have been, but again, there's sort of like increased demand. And I think what it's driving is then more partnership and recognition that solutions in a silo aren't going to yield the best outcome. So you're seeing that people recognize that we not only need this, but we have to do it in a way that's different. So we have to connect and kind of cross-cut these different audiences. We need to be working across sectors. It can't just sit in the public sector, in the private sector, or in the nonprofit sector. We have to have all three at the table and figuring it out. We need to be aligning resources versus segregating resources. So I think that's been really exciting, because I think we just get to much better solutions when it's so intersectional across audiences, people, resources, space, partners, etc. I get really excited about that, and gives me a lot of hope, just out of like it's a practical need for us to be able to do what people need us to do, and just seeing it kind of break down barriers that existed before.
I love your notion of being more aware of what's possible, because it just completely removes, we can't do that, it's impossible. And also this idea of partnership. It's so true, I think, in this impact first business space, recognizing that you don't need to do something by yourself and that you don't need to work in your own silo is really helpful when you're trying to solve a problem that people are saying is not solvable or impossible. But if we don't solve this, then what? Along those lines, what advice would you give to someone entering this impact, even impacts design strategy world? If they're starting out today, knowing what you know, what would you tell them to focus on or to put their energy towards?
I feel like I've benefited so much by playing across the different sectors. I mean, I sit at Gensler, which is largely in the private sector. A lot of many of our clients are private sector clients, but I think I also spent a lot of time with nonprofit clients and joined boards. I was really deeply engaged with, supporting nonprofits. So I kind of understood how they worked, how they were operating, the challenges they were experiencing. A lot of partnership and collaboration with city agencies. I think understanding how the different sectors and their motivations are was really valuable for me, to be able to understand how they can work together. I would say, just from an advice standpoint, creating opportunities for yourself to kind of immerse in those different spaces is super valuable, because you start to see what are the common challenges, what are the things that sound the same, and what is very different. I think I always talk about like time is very different between those groups. How people perceive time is so interesting to think about in a city agency meeting versus a nonprofit organization meeting versus a client meeting for a financial services firm. Like just the way people perceive time. It's just useful because there's people are speaking different languages, they're using different words, there's entirely different like ways of engaging and connecting. But I think that again, that cross-sector view helps me sort of understand, okay, here's how we navigate it. Here's the parts that you guys align on. Here's the ways that we can kind of create a more symbiotic outcome. And that's been super valuable in my experience. So I think just finding those opportunities to immerse, join a nonprofit, get involved in the leadership, deeply engage with a startup, hear their journey. Like I just think getting like immersing in those things helps to give you a picture of how it all kind of works together and what the biggest kind of differences in these spaces are.
This has been a blast from the past because what you're saying, I needed to hear when I was presenting my thesis for graduate school. Just being like, I don't understand how this weighs into that. And all they needed to say is, you will figure it out. Just like start working.
Right. Which goes to like another piece, like to me, two things that I think perseverance is always like just kind of perseverance. And then what makes perseverance possible is being comfortable with incremental change. I've sort of accepted that like you're not going to shift the world overnight. I take incremental improvement as still meaningful in the overall landscape. You need people that are shifting it in bigger ways, but I think you also need people just like chipping away at these like very mundane things. And, you know, you keep chipping away enough, and I think eventually it does become a boulder. But I think it's important to kind of recognize that there are going to be days that they are very small wins, but they're still very meaningful in the broader landscape of things. And I think that enables some of that like perseverance and willingness to just kind of keep working at it.
On that note, what's next? Like, what's next for you?
You know, there's a couple of things. You know, I mentioned the library. I think we've been doing a lot of work lately with library systems. So to me, the library system work is super inspiring and interesting. We did a facilities master plan with Enoch Pratt in Baltimore, which was really cool, and really thought about how are we aligning community need to where we have our existing branches and help them think through like a flexible framework to grow. They're meeting need, but in a way that's not stressing their kind of real estate. We were able to then work with the San Francisco Public Library System on a strategic plan. So helping them think through like what is their mandate for the next 10, 20 years. And we're doing the same with Boston Public Library. So working with these large city library systems to really think about what is their future at the organizational level, what should their mission be, or how do they want to evolve their mission to kind of meet the moment that we're in. And then by extension, you know, there's the space part of that becomes kind of the next conversation. How do your physical branches respond to that strategic plan? So that's been really exciting work. We've been doing that a lot in partnership with Margaret Sullivan Studios, has been a really awesome partner in that. So all the library work's been really cool. I think the other two things, one, the public engagement lab. So just this week, we finally put out our blog post about the public engagement lab, which has been a labor of love for a while with a couple of collaborators at Gensler, but really just building on, decades at this point of experience working in community, and how do we really create inclusive process that is co-creative with the partners that we have. And then bringing that methodology and that thinking and those values to a wider range of projects and work. So the Public Engagement Lab has been a big investment, and really hoping that that's something that we can continue to grow and evolve. And then the third one is pretty interesting. I got involved this year so Gensler has a race and diversity committee and 5 strategies to fight racism. And one of those strategies is strategy 3, which is really around, how are we bringing equitable outcomes to our work? I'm excited about that because that's really a global platform to talk to others across the firm and really explore like how is equitable development, equitable outcomes showing up in our day-to-day work? What are the clients that are supporting it? Are there common methodologies? Are there ways that all of this other stuff that I've shared can kind of get infused into it? So it's trying to coalesce at a macro level across the firm some of this story and narrative. So that all has been super exciting. And we'll just kind of keep seeing what that continues to uncover. But all three of those things have been pretty cool.
I can't wait to follow along, especially on the library institutional space, what it looks like and what Gensler comes up with. I think that's going to be fascinating. So I will stay tuned for more information on that.
Yes, I will keep you posted.
Anyway, thank you. This was a great conversation. It's incredible to hear all the things that you've been up to and that Gensler is putting its heart and soul into. It's really impressive.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you reached out. This is really fun.
As we wrap up today's episode, we hope you're leaving with some insights, inspiration, and perhaps a spark of an idea. At the core of every story we cover lies the undeniable truth. What truly drives impact is the relentless pursuit of change, paired with a deep commitment to the greater good. We're always reminded that making a mark on the world is not easy and isn't just about breaking through barriers. It's about thinking differently about what impact means in our world and what is possible in creating it. Thank you for joining us on Ideas for Impact, where rebels with a cause redefine the meaning of what is possible. For more episodes that challenge the norm, follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're interested, dive deeper into our journey at ideasforimpact.ca. Until next time, friends, keep pushing the boundaries of what is possible.